history of Italy spreads across more than 2000 years, and even a brief video like this one tells an amazing tale of a country that defied destruction and shaped the world we live in, multiple times over. From gladiators to artists, from establishing an empire and great cities when most of the world was still living in huts, to again bringing light to the Dark Ages with the Renaissance and advancing human civilization. From great inventions and discoveries to religion and faith, this is a story of resilience and hope. The geography of the Italian peninsula is ideal for human settlement. Rich soils next to Europe, but with a natural defensive barrier created by the Alps and access to the Mediterranean Sea. This lush environment attracted settlers, and around 800 BC, the Etruscan civilization emerged in what they called Etruria, in the northwest of modern Italy. This period coincided with the Iron Age, and the Etruscans were skilled blacksmiths, which was a trait that helped them become a major power in the region. We still don't know exactly where they came from, but we do know that they enjoyed gladiator games, a passion passed down to the Romans later on. They had vibrant frescoes that can still be admired in archaeological sites, and their language was distinct from other ancient tongues. Around the 6th century BC, it was the Etruscan League that controlled big chunks of Italy, and it's said that the first three Roman kings were Etruscans as well. At the same time, several Latin-speaking groups were present in the peninsula, which were forming a different alliance, called the Latin League. Through cunning maneuvering, the Romans came to control the Italian peninsula, and by the 3rd century BC, they completely outmaneuvered the other Etruscans. The Romans' journey to becoming a great empire was almost stopped in its tracks by another great power from North Africa, Carthage. The struggle for regional power took the form of a series of conflicts known as the Punic Wars, which culminated with the famous general Hannibal, who crossed the Alps with a huge army that included war elephants and decimated the Roman military in a series of brutal defeats. But ultimately, Hannibal didn't succeed in capturing Rome, and another brilliant general, Scipio Africanus, managed to push the Carthaginians away, and eventually the Romans captured and destroyed them. Afterwards, Rome began expanding, and by the 1st century BC, it was the biggest power in the Mediterranean, which they called Mare Nostrum, meaning our sea. They expanded over 3 continents, and besides their formidable army, their culture also bloomed, especially after embracing Greek-style architecture, philosophy, and literature. Of course, the custom was always to conquer first, culture later for the militaristic Romans. Even though things were going good for the Senate and People's Republic of Rome, with what might even be considered a small democracy that included elections, term limits, and public assemblies. The late Republic started to show signs of tiredness. Institutions started facing pressure from influential Roman generals, which, rallying the military behind them, began challenging the status quo by bending term limits and not obeying age limits for entering high office. In the 1st century BC, Rome was run by three powerful men in what was called the Triumvirate: Pompey Magnus, Marcus Crassus, and Julius Caesar. After Marcus Crassus dies, a civil war begins between the other two, a war that was won by Caesar, who proclaimed himself dictator for life in 44 BC. However, the Roman Senate did not see this move as just, and a few months later, Julius Caesar was assassinated, with the final stab being delivered by his friend Brutus, a name that became synonymous with betrayal following this act. The Republic was already on the brink of extinction even before Caesar was part of the landscape, and after his death, another civil war followed between his adopted son Octavian and his right-hand man Mark Antony. In this war, Octavian was victorious against Mark Antony and his lover Cleopatra, proclaimed himself emperor, changed his name to Augustus Caesar, and ruled over Rome for the next 40 years. After Octavian and until the 5th century AD, Rome remained a monarchy, ruled by emperors, and in this period it experienced both peace and prosperity, as well as dark periods, often influenced by who was in charge. On one hand, emperors like Caligula, who declared war on the ocean and made his source a senator, or Nero, who killed his own mother and set fire to Rome, are remembered for their insanity and cruelty. On the other hand, Roman emperors also included great ones, like the formidable Trajan, who expanded the empire, Hadrian, who built a wall that defined the borders of the empire or promoted arts, the thinker Marcus Aurelius, who went as far as allowing free speech, or Antoninus Pius, who was a peaceful ruler. During the 2nd century AD, daily life in Rome was at a peak for many of its citizens, who could enjoy the almost modern benefits brought to them by amenities like aqueducts, sewers, road networks, and magnificent concrete and marble buildings. There was even the ancient version of a shopping mall called Trajan's Market. Things did not last though, and by the 3rd century, an endless series of civil wars brought misery to the empire, followed by a comeback in the 4th century under several strong emperors. The most notable of these was Constantine the Great, who converted and helped establish Christianity as a dominant religion in the empire. Ironically, the Christian church he set up ultimately outlived the Roman Empire and is still going strong today. Then came the Germans. Not the kind that are always first at the hotel breakfast and take the best spots by the beach on holidays, but the ones that were organized into tribes and love sacking and pillaging cities. The first wave, in the 4th and early 5th centuries, saw an attempt by the Romans to integrate them into the army, thus managing the threat, but they proved uncontrollable. Rome fell to the barbarian Germanic tribes twice in a century, first to the Visigoths and then to the Vandals. The last Roman emperor also left the scene in 476 AD, officially marking the start of the Dark Ages or the medieval period. Ostrogoths joined the party as well, and they took over large parts of Italy, but other powers were disputing the land, and in the 6th century AD, the Byzantine Emperor Justinian I, helped by his great general Belisarius, successfully invaded and regained large parts of the former empire from the Germanic tribes. Although Justinian hoped to rebuild the Roman Empire, holding on to the land and controlling the peninsula was just impossible. The wars and conflicts fought over Italy left the country broken and easy to invade, which is exactly what happened. The Lombards, another Germanic tribe, came from the north and broke the country into loads of pieces, setting up several kingdoms that lasted for a long time. The Byzantines also lost power gradually, and alongside them and the Lombards, self-governing independent kingdoms began forming. As time passed, some of these kingdoms grew in power and influence. The Papal States, for example, controlled a narrow strip of land from Rome to Ravenna, but more importantly were ruled by the Church and the Pope, which had a great influence over other Christian leaders that sought God's validation. Pope Leo III, seeking protection, allied himself with Emperor Charlemagne, a Frankish emperor. He persuaded Charlemagne to invade northern Italy, push out the Lombards, and in return the Pope crowned him Emperor of the Romans on the Christmas day of the year 800. This generous Christmas gift was long-lasting, as even after Charlemagne's death and as a result of his empire fluctuating in size, northern Italy went back and forth into the German Holy Roman Empire. European economies were affected by endless wars and political insecurities, but into the later period of the Dark Ages they began, slowly, to improve. And in this period, city-states from Italy gained power and wealth. Circling back to the geography that is favorable to Italy, city-states developed into trading hubs, and the ones with sea access also had booming shipbuilding and manufacturing industries. In the south, the Normans invaded Sicily and established a few kingdoms, further developing trade with the mainland country. From the maritime states that formed within the current borders of Italy, Venice, known as the Serene Republic, was the most powerful. Today, Venice is stunning and unique, maybe a little crowded by tourism and billionaires getting married here. But back in the day, it controlled a huge trading empire that made it extremely rich and influential. It was built on top of a lagoon for defensive reasons and used canals instead of streets and gondolas instead of horses. But at its peak during the Renaissance, it controlled a strong navy and parts of Greece, coastal cities in the Balkans, and conducted military raids, further enriching its rulers, the Doges. Genoa was the rival of Venice, another powerful maritime state, located on the other sides of the peninsula on the Ligurian coast, and controlling important trade routes. It was the expansion of the Ottomans in the Mediterranean and the rise of Spain that chiseled away the strength of the Republic of Genoa, and eventually its territory was incorporated by other states. The expansion of the Ottomans also meant a lot of Byzantines became refugees, who ended up fleeing to Italy, bringing alongside ancient texts and artistic techniques. This influx of creativity and fresh ideas, mixed with talent and knowledge brewing inside Italy already, reached a critical mass and exploded into the Renaissance in the 14th and 15th century in Tuscany. The city of Florence nurtured thinkers and artists under the patronage of the Medici family, who sponsored, amongst many others, Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, Botticelli, or Donatello. The Renaissance was a cultural movement that brought light into a world otherwise grey and in suffering, and spread around Europe, but it too faded slowly, and in the 16th century, the power of the city-states began shrinking. Military conflicts saw Habsburgs, French, and other European powers fighting for control of Italian regions. The Papal States also got caught in conflict with the Protestant Reformation movement, ignited by preacher Martin Luther, and the invention of the printing press, a movement which questioned the authority of the Pope and the Catholic Church. The Counter-Reformation movement, launched by the Catholics, aimed to curb the spread of Protestantism, and it was somewhat successful. but it did consolidate the power of the Papal States as independent political and regional powers. Despite the newly gained strength of the Papal States, overall Italian independence diminished, and regions fell into the hands of Spanish and Austrian Habsburgs, as well as Spanish Bourbons later on. They controlled chunks of Italy until 1789, when another emperor, this time French, none other than Napoleon Bonaparte, began a war of conquest across Europe. His campaign included Italy, which was invaded, but also reorganized from small kingdoms controlled by city-states into larger, centralized republics. The period after Napoleon's defeat in Italy is named Risorgimento, or the Resurgence. This period continued Napoleon's idea, not the continental conquest one, but instead focused on consolidating the republics he created. It was a social, political, and administrative project, and eventually, out of it, the unified state of Italy emerged. European powers tried through the Congress of Vienna to put Italy to the same arrangement prior to the introduction of modern reformist policies, but it didn't work, and calls for independence grew louder and bigger against old aristocracies that wanted to turn back the clock. National identity and ethnicity ideas spread amongst young Europeans in the 19th century, including the cry Viva Italia, which erupted across the nation like a wildfire. All over Europe, revolution was the word of the day, and as Italy made no exception, the north of the country united under Prime Minister of Piedmont Sardinia, Camillo de Cavour, whilst in the south the romantic revolutionary figure Giuseppe Garibaldi took over Sicily with 1,000 men and then marched up to unite the peninsula. Italy became unified in 1861. The first king of the newly formed country was Victor Emmanuel II. Later on, in 1866, Venice joined the newly formed state, and in 1870 so did Rome. And that delay in joining the kingdom is the reason that the capital cities were initially Turin and Florence. After unification, there was a period of peace, but as you've already noticed, Italian history is filled up with ups and downs, and unfortunately, this was the case again. World War I engulfed Europe, and although Italy was amongst the winners of the conflict, it too was plunged into a deep depression like the rest of the continent. A huge migration process affected the country, seeing its citizens living by the millions. People were angry, afraid, and disappointed, which led to a rise in extremism and the establishment of fascism, whose leading figure was Benito Mussolini. He used intimidation, violence, and suppressed freedoms, was aided by a militia known as the Black Shirts, and seized power in 1922. Mussolini claimed that he will restore the glory of Rome, but instead led the army into a series of defeats across Africa, proved to be unpopular to the masses, and his regime allied himself with the German one, fueling World War II and contributing to millions of deaths. He was, however, removed from power in 1943, tried to regain it, and was ultimately executed with his mistress by Italian partisans in 1945 near Lake Como. After the war, a referendum was held, and the Italians chose to re-establish the Republic, a beautiful arch over time to the Roman Republic, restore democracy, and become one of the founding members of the European Union. Post-war, the country enjoyed an economic boom, thanks again to its geography and resourcefulness of its people. Enjoyed a long-lasting period of peace, and today it's a desirable place to live and one of the most visited countries on the planet. This was indeed a short history. To talk about Italy's journey through time would take years, and that probably wouldn't be covering all of it either. But the purpose of this video is to bring some of this rich past to life and give some context to why Italy is where it is today, after centuries of hardship and centuries of overcoming adversities. If you like this video, feel free to join our growing community, and until next time, ciao!